All right. Hi, Epidemics. This is it, the last lecture. We've got a couple of things due this week. A review quiz and a last essay, and that is all for the semester. Any questions on any of this part of stuff, business stuff? Nope. All right. So, oh my goodness. We're going to talk a little bit more about what can happen after an infection. So post-infection problems. Last time we met, we talked about post-infection syndrome. Now we're going to talk about autoimmune disease. So autoimmune disease, I think I introduced this last time. There are lots of different known diseases where your immune system can attack the cells in your body. We can think about celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes. These are usually more common in women than in men. They tend to start in adulthood. And in the US, about 1 out of every 15 people has an autoimmune disease. So they're fairly common. And they're very difficult to treat. Treatment can reduce the symptoms, but cannot cure the condition. So I want to focus in specifically on one disease as an example of this. This is cutting edge news because the paper that talked about, there was a paper published this year that showed how a specific virus, Epstein-Barr virus, how that causes multiple sclerosis. So Epstein-Barr, widespread virus, causes mononucleosis in young adults. Most of us have been exposed to it at some point. But in some individuals, for whatever reason, we know there's some people are genetically susceptible. So if you're genetically susceptible, and we know that age at infection matters, you get infected at the wrong age, you can develop multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is when antibodies bind to what's called the myelin sheath of nerves. So this is kind of like the insulation on nerves. So you can picture this if you know anything about electrical cords. Imagine an electrical cord where the outer layer is damaged and frayed. It's not going to work as well, right? That's what's going on in multiple sclerosis. So we've looked at this really disrupts this function of the nervous system, results in things like muscle weakness, severe fatigue, numbness. It tends to get worse as people get older. They can be, they can progress, i.e. it gets worse and then they get better. And then they have another outbreak and it gets worse and they get a little better, but they never go back to being as healthy as they were before they started developing MS. So it's not like you get sick for a while and then you feel normal again. You get sick, you feel better, but not perfect. And then you get sicker and you feel better, but not as good as the previous remission. So it's long been known that 99% of MS patients have antibodies to Epstein-Barr in their bloodstream. That sounds huge, right? Well, it is until you realize that 90% of people without MS have the same antibodies. So until this paper was published this year, most scientists did not think that this was significant. They didn't think that this meant anything. But a new paper shows that they actually found the specific protein on nerves that the antibodies can bind to. And they found that the antibodies in MS patients could bind to this protein in the nervous system, whereas the antibodies in people without MS, they attacked the Epstein-Barr virus at a different location. So they weren't able to attack the same proteins in the nerves. It's like we have two different colored pens. We can write with either of them, but the black one makes darker ink. In the case of antibodies, the black one will attack the nervous system. The blue one does not. Does that work for you guys? Okay. All right, so if you want to take a screenshot, you can take a screenshot. And the last post-infection problem that I want to talk about is cancer. There are multiple viruses that we know increase the risk of getting cancer after an infection. If we prevent the infection, we prevent the cancer. And I'm only going to talk about one of these, and that's human papillomavirus, or HPV. HPV is actually a collection of closely related viruses. Only a few of them are capable of triggering cancer later on. Most people who are sexually active will get HPV at some point in their lives. Most people are asymptomatic. You don't have any symptoms. If you do have symptoms, they're genital warts. They often go away by themselves. They don't require treatment. Not a big deal. But certain strains of the HPV virus can insert their genes into the host cell genetic material. So they can insert their genes into your chromosomes. Now, that by itself does not necessarily cause cancer, but if the insertion site is in what are called oncogenes, onco is cancer, so genes that are associated with cancer, if they're in an oncogene, that makes it much more likely that you're going to get, you're going to develop cancer. So it increases the risk. It's not a guarantee that you're going to get cancer, but it increases the risk. The kinds of cancers we're talking about, the one that's best known is cervical cancer. Cervical cancer is almost always associated with HPV infection. We've known this for a very, very long time because nuns don't get cervical cancer. Only people who've been sexually active seem to get cervical cancer. And we use the pap smear to look for early signs of cervical cancer. If you detect it, it's easy enough to remove the damaged tissue and, stop it before it spreads to the rest of the body. If you don't catch it soon, that's a problem. But it's not just cervical cancer. HPV also can contribute to penile cancer. Yes, guys, that's the penis. Anal cancer, vaginal cancer, vulvar cancer, mouth cancers, throat cancers. So lots of different cancers in lots of different places. We have a vaccine. So the vaccine is against several different strains of HPV, specifically against the ones that we know contribute to the cancer risk, the ones that we know are problematic. Since we've introduced the vaccine, which really has not been that long, we're already seeing a decline in cervical cancer cases, which is a sign that this vaccine is a vaccine against cancer. Other viruses, you guys understand how HPV causes cancer? Good. So vaccine is really important to prevent HPV-caused cancer. While it is a sexually transmitted infection, it's the one sexually transmitted infection that condoms don't really help with. So vaccine is definitely preferred.
Why is that, Professor? I don't understand.
Because the virus can infect areas that would not be protected by the condom. So
like pelvic area, I guess.
The pelvic area, yep.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And outside the vagina on women, which means that it could contact with the pelvic area in men. Yep. Okay. So other viruses, the hepatitis B and C viruses cause liver cancer. There's a vaccine for those. There are a whole bunch that are associated with cancer that we can't vaccinate against, including Epstein-Barr, which causes blood cancers, HIV, which suppresses the immune system. Your immune system fights off cells that become cancerous. So a lot of us have cells that are that become early stage cancer, but our immune system fights them off. Other herpes viruses, not the usual sexually transmitted herpes or the kissing herpes, but in that family. So related to those herpes viruses and related to the Epstein-Barr virus. All right. So that wraps up post-infection health problems. And now we're going to get to what I know you guys have all been waiting for. So take a screenshot. I saw Jerry already took his.
Professor, you want to know something crazy that I just learned about herpes?
Sure.
Apparently like 1 in 2 people in America have herpes and they don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
Like oral herpes.
Yeah. Herpes is pretty common and a lot of people are asymptomatic. And once you get it, you have it. It's one of those, it's like chicken pox. Chicken pox, when you've had chicken pox, the virus stays in your body. It may not cause disease, but it's still there. And if something happens to suppress your immune system, then you can have an outbreak that we call shingles. Same thing with herpes. Yeah. But herpes is not really a big deal because for most of us, it's asymptomatic. Okay. You may not remember this, but we are in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. So everybody wants to know what's next, how will it end? I don't have an answer for you. We don't know for sure what's going to happen. So what I've collected is some general information about how other pandemics end or ended and what is possible or likely to happen in the next few years. So how have previous epidemics ended? We've talked about a whole bunch of them. How do they end? What happened to the
Go ahead.
What happened to the 1918 flu?
People were quarantined and it kind of went away.
Yeah, quarantining was not as widespread with that one.
Oh, we evolved.
It evolved to be milder. The descendants of the 1918 flu are still around. What about plague? Plague hasn't really gone away. It's still around. It's rare because we have treatment. We can treat it with antibiotics. And there is evidence that there are genetic mutations in people to make us more resistant to infection. So we are less likely to get the infection, or we're going to have a milder infection than the people who were around during the Black Death. When the plague of Justinian, which was plague in ancient Rome, basically there was very high mortality and there was some herd immunity developed, and eventually it reached a point there was no one left susceptible. We kind of see this with the, we kind of saw this with the later plagues as well. Plague would come through a city, it would infect pretty much everybody, a bunch of children would die, and then everybody would be immune and it would disappear until enough new susceptible people showed up. So herd immunity can help end a pandemic. I know you guys know this one. What happened with smallpox?
Vaccinated.
Smallpox, we have a great vaccine. That worked perfectly. And there were a couple of things that were public health successes. Doing things like contact tracing, quarantine, changing public behaviors. And this has worked with the original SARS virus, which had the advantage of having a short incubation period. So it was not contagious for a long period of time before people got symptoms. So people would get symptoms and they could get quarantined before they could spread it. there was a quick a short time period before you quarantined. Now, SARS, the original, which is deadlier than our current COVID pandemic, it could still be out there in animals. It's a zoonotic. So that's a concern. We see the same sort of thing with Ebola. Contact tracing, quarantining, changing public behaviors, specifically funeral behaviors. But again, it's zoonotic, so there are outbreaks periodically. And it tends to be so deadly that it quickly runs out of hosts. The third one that I want to mention with public health is one we did not talk about, which was a cholera outbreak in London. This is kind of a famous story. John Snow, not that John Snow, a different John Snow, mapped locations of cholera and realized that they were concentrated around a public source of water called the Broad Street Pump. And complicated. Basically, the handle was removed from that pump so that people were not getting their water from this source, and cholera cleared up. So as a result of this particular outbreak, the London cholera outbreak, we discovered that clean drinking water sources are critical to preventing cholera outbreaks. And so now we have a lot more clean drinking water, at least in wealthy countries. So those are the kinds of things we know have worked in the past. So go ahead and take a screenshot. Some of these things can certainly help with the COVID pandemic, but COVID is too widespread for contact tracing, quarantine to work very well. It's not fatal enough that we are reducing the population density. We don't have herd immunity because the immunity does not last long term. We don't have great treatments. I mean, we do have good treatments, but they're not great treatments. So what do we have and what is likely to happen? Well, a lot of people are saying it's going to become endemic. Okay, this sounds good, right? What does endemic mean?
That we're gonna have it forever, but it's not gonna be killing us. It's gonna be maintained, I guess, or sustainable, if that even makes sense.
Yeah, a steady, predictable rate of infection. The bad news is that endemic does not mean less harmful. It just means that we're not going to have these peaks and troughs, that the rate of infection is going to be much steadier, much more predictable. So I have a quote, Dr. Eris Katsarakis, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that one. A disease can be endemic and both widespread and deadly. Malaria killed more than 600,000 people in 2020. 10 million fell ill with tuberculosis that same year, and 1.5 million died. Endemic certainly does not mean that evolution has somehow tamed a pathogen. so that life simply returns to normal. Nor does it suggest guaranteed stability. There can still be disruptive waves from endemic infections, as seen with the US measles outbreak in 2019. And as I would add, when we have severe outbreaks of the flu every few years. So, what can we do? Public health is a major tool that can help us reduce infections and reduce mortality. What should we be doing? You guys can predict this. Where did Nate disappear? It's our last class.
Well, I mean, naturally, we should follow public health policy.
Yeah, we don't have any public health policies in this country right now.
Well, the mask mandate, that's not a public health policy?
Yes, but the mask mandates have all been lifted.
Well, masks, get vaccinated, of course.
Yep, those are the big ones. Even a cloth mask reduces transmission rates by 50%. We can improve and increase the supply of therapeutics. We have drugs that we know reduce mortality from COVID. There's not enough out there. We don't have a good supply of them. And the ones that we have, you have to give them, a lot of them in hospital settings. We don't have a prescription that you can pick up at the pharmacy and take. So we can fund research into new treatments and new vaccines, preferably vaccines that last longer and have fewer side effects. Right, Jerry?
Absolutely. I have to get a booster because I'm going to BU. It sucks.
Oh, I know. I have to get a booster too. And I've been putting it off till after the semester.
I might go next week because we don't have school. So
yeah. For COVID, the other thing we could do is improved air filtration. With the London cholera epidemic, that triggered a push for clean drinking water. It would be nice if COVID could push for better indoor air quality, because there are filtration systems that we could use that would help increase airflow, have better filtration. Nate, go ahead.
Would you be like alluding to like the filtration on airplanes? How I believe it's filtered like every 3 minutes.
Yeah, the filtration on airplanes is really good. If we could get that in like school, public buildings, that would be better. I know the labs at North Shore have some of the worst indoor air quality. They're really bad. And there's one classroom on Lynn that is just, when I teach it, when I have taught in that room, I would open the windows even in the middle of winter because you could smell the mold in the air filtration system.
I'm sure the smell from Lynn was just as bad. No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Okay, so if you want to take a screenshot, go ahead. So what is the state of COVID right now? So I've spent, well, I honestly, an hour ago, I was on the computer looking up some of this data. So what is the state of COVID now? It's not great. COVID is evolving very quickly. And the trend that we're seeing is that it is becoming more transmissible, and it can evolve to evade the immune system. So these waves of increased infection are due to genetic changes in the virus. We are starting, Nate, go ahead.
Would you say that with the increase in transmission, it's becoming less virulent too, or is that not a trend you're noticing?
Well, Omicron is less virulent, less deadly than the other types. But Delta, which was the wave before Omicron, was more deadly. But when we look at the new version, so the newest wave, which is called, I don't know why they're not doing better naming conventions, Omicron BA.2 has an R0 of 8. Remember, R0 is if everybody around you is susceptible, the average infected person infects 8 other people. That's putting it up here with some of the most contagious diseases, which include pertussis or whooping cough, which has an R0 of about 16, and measles, which also has an R0 in the low to mid-teens. It's more contagious than the Black Death Plague. It's more contagious than smallpox. The original strain of COVID had an R0 of just under 3. So it's more than twice as contagious as the original strain of COVID. And we can look at the common cold, the flu, Ebola. This is the 1918 flu. This is the flu in an average winter. Nate, go ahead.
So just a question, is the strain of the 1918 flu, is that still around today? And it just got overshadowed by modern flu, or it just kind of died off, or?
It evolved. So it's kind of the ancestor of the seasonal flu that we get. But the genes, it's lost a lot of those genes that made it so deadly. But it became slightly more contagious at the same time.
Do you think that's a preferable trade-off? More contagious, but less deadly?
That depends on how deadly. Because if we look at, so if we talk about the, let me go to the whiteboard, I can draw this better. If we look at transmissibility, and we look at case fatality rates, it's the combination of these things that matter. So if we have a transmissibility of, let's say 5, just picking a random number, and a case fatality rate of 2, so 2% of people who get it will die from it. That is going to give you a certain number of people who die from that particular outbreak. If you have an R0 of around 8 and a case fatality rate of around 1, you have so many more infected that you end up with total more deaths in total. So the case fatality rate might be lower, but so many more people are infected that we still have more deaths. Does that answer your question, Nate?
Yeah, actually, it makes perfect sense. It's almost kind of like a weight and balance thing. But now that you put it this way, I guess if the multiplier of people infected is an astronaut, I mean, because it's exponential when you think about it, because
Mhm.
I spread it to Jerry, and then Jerry spreads it to 3 people, and then those 3 people, like, that could actually be of a magnitude greater than a low case fatality rate. And yeah, it just opens up a lot of questions and kind of makes my head hurt a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I guess I wasn't valuing as much, but it makes a lot more sense now. Thank you.
Yeah. The Delta wave, that strain of COVID was deadly. But Omicron, less deadly, higher transmission, lots more deaths. Omicron killed a lot more people than the Delta strain of COVID. All right.
Right. So back to what Nate was saying, if if the RO is higher, but the case fatality rate is lower, it's still of a bigger group of people. So
Mhm.
still more people died.
Yes.
Which makes your brain hurt.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So this is what we're seeing. The new strain that's come out has an even higher R naught. There's another strain that people have detected that has an R naught of around 12, which puts it in the range with measles. So we keep seeing increase in transmissibility. That doesn't guarantee that case fatality rates will go down. It does not guarantee that mortality will go down.
Why are they doing such extreme measures in China now where they're locking people in? It's like the neighbors, they're chaining the doors. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
I'm not understanding.
That is just brutal public health policy to reduce transmission.
Definitely brutal. Someone has a medical emergency, they can't leave and seek help if
Yep.
they're chained in. So
Yeah. It's what is good for one person is not always good for society as a whole scenario. And in the US, we're much more individual focused. And in China, they're much more society focused.
Oh yeah, it's the China, especially in Shanghai, it's scary. Like there's zero COVID policy, and I mean, it's to one extreme, you know what I mean? So I feel bad for those people, and hopefully they get it under control. Because I mean, I don't know how much is true or old video footage, but you see them like in like suits, like taking people away, and people just screaming out of their windows at like night and stuff like that. So prayers for them.
Yeah, we need something kind of in between. And of course, one of the worst things about COVID is our immunity decreases rapidly. With things like smallpox, you get smallpox, you're not going to get it again. That's just not the case with this one. Okay, so take a screenshot.
that was an interesting bit of information, I would say.
What I said or what the cat said?
No. Just that whole segue on the whiteboard is just trippy.
Yeah.
I think what's truly scary about COVID is just like, I know I say this a lot, but humans are often creatures of habit, but just the wide range of symptoms it causes. It's almost insane. Like, I know I told you all about like the hives I got, but then it's so systemic. Like, it's not just an upper respiratory thing. It could lead to like heart issues, and then it could lead to like skin problems or kidney or liver. Like, it's insane to me. And that's kind of why I didn't feel like it was natural at first, just because of just how many different parts of the body it affected. So
Yeah, that's because it's affecting the circulatory system. And so anywhere that gets a blood supply could be affected. Okay, but yeah, I mean, this is scary.
And it's ever evolving, it's rapidly ever evolving. It's not like taking a generation or a decade, it's like a month, a season rather.
Yeah.
What's your prediction on it, Professor? Like about the pandemic and what will happen?
Can I answer that in a few? Okay.
The crescendo is called.
Yeah. All right. So when we talk about endemic diseases, I mentioned this a second ago. We really need to remember endemic diseases still kill very large numbers of people. So what are our possibilities? So wouldn't it be great if we could eradicate it? We have eradicated 2 diseases, period. One is smallpox, and one is the cattle disease rinderpest. We did, both required massive worldwide effort. Both required vaccination that basically provided lifelong immunity, or at least very long-term immunity. A lot of public health measures had to go into place to do this. This would be great. Theoretically, it's possible, but this is the real world, and I'm going to tell you it's not going to happen. We could improve public health measures. Increasing vaccination, masking. This could reduce the total amount of virus worldwide, which would reduce the mutation rate, which in my opinion would probably be a good thing. It could become endemic. I think that it is possible that it will become endemic, which means that transmission has an R naught of around 1. I don't think it's going to happen. If it becomes endemic, it's not going to happen soon. We also have an acceptable number of cases and deaths. So the pandemic would be over, but the virus would still be around. So it could still be deadly the way tuberculosis and malaria and the seasonal flu can be deadly. It is evolving. It could evolve. It could evolve either to have a lower R naught, which would be fantastic. It could also evolve for a higher R naught. It could evolve a lower case fatality rate or a higher case fatality rate. If we have increased transmission, we could end up with a severe enough outbreak that we have significant population declines. And as population density goes down, so does the spread. We saw this with a lot of diseases in the past. Plague did this several times. When we talk about lower case fatality rate, one of the problems is COVID is transmissible before you have symptoms, which means there's no evolutionary pressure to reduce that case fatality rate. It doesn't matter to the virus if you die or not, as long as there's time for it to be transmitted. It's also turning out to be very difficult to find good data on a case fatality rate in our current pandemic. I spent a lot of time working on this one. I could not find good, consistent numbers from different sources. We don't know how many people have been infected. We don't know how many people who get infected are asymptomatic. So we have no idea how many people are getting COVID. And mortality is very dependent on things like age and access to good medical care. So it's hard to give a percentage of people who get it who are going to have who are going to die from it. It could become seasonal, similar to flu, where children get COVID and have a little bit of immunity so that reinfection is mild. We could also see improved treatment that reduces the severity of infection and the rate of death. So these are our possibilities. What do you guys think might happen?
I don't think we're going to get rid of it unless we create, you saying we can influence viruses to our benefit, but we're not quite there yet. Mm-hmm. Maybe nanotechnology will evolve, but it'll be endemic, and maybe the case fatality rate will decline a bit and we'll become more immune.
This could be wishful thinking on my part, but I think within 1 to 2 years, we'll find a breakthrough medication that will dramatically improve treatment. I think you'll see deaths be halved. And
well, I think the problem is people have to be willing to be vaccinated. That's having the solution, but not being able to be applied is a problem, actually, because people just don't want to be vaccinated.
If they were more efficient, you definitely see more people vaccinated. But like the professor
if it was
said,
a one
when you have to get a jab that only lasts for like 3 to 4 months, people get fatigued, and how much cost effective is it going to be if we have to vaccinate every single American every 4 to 6 months? Another thing with the vaccines, you definitely see more people get them too if they 100% stopped you from getting infected with there's compounding factors, and I'm not arguing either way because I'm vaccinated myself, but I understand the argument on both sides. On one hand, it dramatically increases your survivability, and which would in turn helps with mutation. On the other hand, there's no definite data saying that the transmissibility is reduced to an extent worth noting. So I mean, yeah.
But to the point though, the willingness of people to be vaccinated is the biggest hurdle, I think.
But I guarantee you, if it was similar to the polio or smallpox vaccine, there'd be so less people that would be hesitant to get it, or that just wouldn't get it. So
Some people still don't believe in COVID regardless. They don't even think it's real.
yeah, I mean,
Anyway,
there's no helping those people though. You know,
yeah.
I mean, I know people who are on the fence, and they said if it was more efficient, or if they didn't have to get jabbed every 4 to 5 months, they would get it in a heartbeat. So, but we just don't have that technology now. So,
Alexis, go ahead.
I also agree. I've gotten like the booster, but a lot of my friends kind of like quit after their second shot because they were just like, why am I continuing to get this? Or like, why do I need this? Yeah, so I just agree with them. Or Nate's point saying like, it's just not as effective as it could be yet.
Mhm.
and then another thing I just want to add, you know, I understand like protecting like the community, but if there's no definite data suggesting that the antibodies derived from an infection and a booster shot, well, there is data, but I haven't seen anything concrete yet, or it's disputed. I'm just wondering why wouldn't they substitute a recent infection over a booster shot?
Okay, so there is data about that. And the data is showing that natural immunity from an infection with COVID is not as strong or as long lasting as the vaccine. So you may be hearing otherwise, but what I've heard from the epidemiologists and the doctors have all said that it is better to get vaccinated than get the disease, and the immunity lasts better.
I wouldn't advocate just going out to get the to the disease, but I mean people get it even if they don't want to get it, or if they protect themselves from it. So I know people who have been quadruple boosted or not quadruple boosted, but quadruple jabbed, and they had COVID 5 times. So it's
For
it's
sure.
nuts.
I think another issue is the similarity of the symptoms to the flu and things. You know, I had a friend that got it. He said, I just think I had the flu. So it's different layers to this issue, honestly, because even if they came out with this super one shot, it's some people still that don't believe it's real. And there's other people that believe that they just have the flu.
That and the false positives too, with like
Yeah, I was
the
gonna say
PCR
that.
tests. Yeah, because I took 2 back-to-back COVID tests that they were the antigen and they were positive, and then I took a PCR test and it was negative, and I had no idea, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think this is going to be over anytime soon. I hesitate to make predictions because in 2020 in the spring, when I was teaching this class, a student asked me in January what I thought about the epidemic that was starting in China. And I was like, oh, we don't need to worry about that. I was so wrong. But I'm not optimistic. I'm not an optimist in general.
hope for the best, expect the worst kind of attitude.
Yeah.
I apply that to most things.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all I wanted to discuss with you guys. Is there anything else anybody wants to ask me about anything?
I'd just like to make a comment that I learned a lot in this class. It was fun. I was an active participant. If you didn't know, shocking. Yes, I know. But
Who are you again?
yeah, I don't know. I just think out loud. Sometimes I get lucky. But yeah, I think you're a great educator. You
Absolutely.
inspire discussion, which I think is really valuable. Even for an online class, I still kind of almost felt like there, and I think that's kind of lost with virtual classes. So, pat on the back, you hang your hat on that. Yeah, I really liked the class. My perception changed on a lot of things, to include big pharma, animal conservation, the importance of knowledge in terms of medicine and things involved with viruses and pathogens. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed the class, and I really liked the discussion that came with it. So thank you, and thank every one of you, my fellow students.
I'll say that I'm never erasing these notes. These are probably the notes I'm going to keep longer than any other subject. These are a lot of talking points. I can just pull my phone out, because there's a lot of fake pseudoscientists roaming around that are educated based off of nonsense. So yeah, it helps me clear the fog about my own health and choices I can make for my own family as well. Because I didn't get vaccinated until I took this class, if you didn't know.
I did
Remember I
not
was
know.
crying? Remember I was crying?
Mhm.
I really cried though. I'm not joking.
You guys are going to make me cry right now.
So yeah, I appreciate it. And it just opened my eyes and my understanding about humanity, and I'm just hoping nanotechnology takes off soon.
Yeah, I'm hoping for a good breakthrough. Well, I've got to come right back at you guys, because the students make the class. And without good participation from students, it doesn't matter what I'm teaching. Everybody just kind of gets bored after a while. So participation is very important. And I've had some good participation in this class, not just Nate and Jerry.
Yeah, everyone did great projects too. I went back to YouTube to look at a few projects. The Lyme disease one, there was a couple of different things. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, this has probably been one of the best group of students I've taught. You guys have just done great on all the assignments. The projects were great. Yeah, it's been a very good class.
What would you say? Well, I know this might sound like a weird question, but what would you say the pathogen that you find most fascinating to teach or whatnot?
Good question.
Oh, that is a good question. The one that I am most interested in is definitely malaria. Parasites are just so freaking weird compared to everything else. And we don't really get into a lot of the weirdness. I mean, you guys remember the life cycle and how complicated it was. We just skimmed the surface of the weirdness that's parasitic diseases.
The xenomorph. I'd say the one I enjoyed the most was tuberculosis. This might be kind of nerdy, but there's a Western video game called Red Dead Redemption 2. And the main character you play as, he gets tuberculosis, sadly. And you kind of see him deteriorate and just how much it really messed him up. And yeah, it was a crazy bacteria back then, especially with no modern medicine of today. So
it still is.
Yeah, especially now that it's getting resistant to those medications. So
Anybody else want to chime in with a favorite disease?
That's my favorite quote of the class right there. Oh man.
I thought those hemorrhagic fevers were pretty interesting too, just because of how insanely damaging they are. I mean, a virus that causes you to bleed from almost every orifice of your body, it just sounds terrifying. And I didn't really I remember the Ebola thing, like people just like joking about it, like in school. But then like I looked it up and I was like, wow, like hemorrhagic fevers, they're crazy, like insanely damaging.
Yeah, they are.
I really enjoyed learning about the bubonic plague.
Hmm.
I think it's very interesting.
Yep.
That's
He's my
Jerry's
little plague
favorite
doctor.
too.
Yeah. Oh, that's the image I get in my head when I think of the plague now. That filled with like potpourri or something, like
Yep.
the nose part.
Now, I always wondered that. I'm glad we learned about that. That they would put like aromatics and stuff into the beak of the
Mhm.
mask.
Yeah,
so to
cheers,
speak.
the
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that you always wondered about, but didn't really know why it happened, and then you learned about it. So,
Mhm. Good. Tell your friends. Tell the other
Right.
students.
if you need a science elective, epidemics, go
Yep.
for it.
Yeah. Because it's current topics, it's so current and applicable that it makes it so relevant to us.
Yeah, I think that gives it a penchant for the knowledge that comes with it and the willingness of how relevancy works. So.
Okay. So that's all I got for you, except for a cattail.
One more cattail. That was perfect timing, wasn't
Send off the class, right?
it?
Maybe a meow or two thrown in.
Right.
I hope you guys all have a great summer.
Yeah, you guys, man, it's been great.
Be
Okay.
safe. The pandemic's not over.
Good
Right.
luck, everybody. If you have any questions, I will check my emails. Not on a daily basis during the summer, but you're welcome to email me with other questions you come up with.
There's another one. Good luck at BU, Jerry, for real.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah.
Peace, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good summer.
Just one more question.
Yes.
Going to work, my mom's always like, "Are you wearing your mask?" And I'm like, "Of course I am." For everyone else, she swears it protects me. Does it at all?
It does.
It does.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I loved your class.
Oh, thanks.
Never bored. All right. Have a good day and a good summer. Goodbye.
Bye.